Hey, this is a Hakawati production. Hi there. I'm Nadia Michelle, and I'm so glad you're here. If you enjoy this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments so you can share your thoughts with us and our other listeners. We think that that's one great way for everyone to learn and grow together. We have news today, literally. We're talking about the news industry in the Middle East. Most people take news for granted. It's always there. We can get it whenever we want, and these days pretty much wherever we want. But let's not forget the news industry is also a business. To help us understand what's really going on behind the scenes, we have in the studio with us the managing editor of Lebanon's Annahar English newspaper, Elias Sakr. Hi, Elias. Thanks for coming to the show.
Hi, Nadia. Thank you for having me.
So when did you launch the website?
The website was launched 6 years ago, but we actually did a revamp like 3 years ago. It used to be more of a news blog, and now it's a full-fledged news website, covering everything from politics to business.
Like a regular newspaper, but online, and it's the equivalent of the... So do you guys translate the articles that are on Nahar
Not
Arabic?
really, no. No, we have our own coverage. Sometimes we do use what our Arabic reporters produce, and we add to that.
Yeah. So newspapers used to make their money with ads based on the number of copies they sold. And now with online media, it's based on the number of clicks, right? So how's the news industry doing in the region as far as you know?
Look, those are like globally challenging circumstances for newspapers.
I mean, in the U.S., online advertising is like doing really well. It's big business. In 2018, it was worth $109 billion. That's all online advertising. Of course, that includes social media and all that.
The thing is, print advertising revenues are declining, okay? The growth in online or digital ad revenue is not compensating for that decline. And it's a global problem for all newspapers. Take, for instance, the US, okay? Most of the local papers are struggling, okay? Only a few national papers have managed to break even or make profits. In Lebanon, it's actually worse for newspapers because they didn't have a profitable business model to begin with. They used to survive on political money, political financing. And now that the money stopped flowing, okay, they had to reinvent their business model. They had to consider a profitable business model, one that generates money or profits. So it was too little too late for most of them. That's why you saw a Safir close, Al Hayat closed its offices in Beirut. Most other papers are struggling. So they had to go through this transition from a traditional newspaper to a digital platform.
They seem to be doing pretty well in the U.S., though, like I said. So is it maybe an example of how the Middle East is kind of lagging behind, or they don't know how to translate the news onto social media? Because in the U.S., news is hot commodity, but it's not in the traditional sense. Now news has become kind of this entertainment, basically, that divides people and gets people kind of engaged and angry, and and that's what's attracting people. And it's mostly on the platforms, on the social media platforms. So the news, people go to the website, I guess, driven by what they're seeing on Facebook and all that. Is that something that's not developed enough in the Middle East, in your opinion?
Yes, and they embarked on that digital transformation journey late. They embarked on that transition late. So now they're struggling. The ad revenue is dropping significantly.
Yeah.
The print ad revenue is dropping significantly, and they can't find a way to compensate for that. I mean, they're trying, but I think it's too little too late for most of them.
Yeah, well, it's never too late. I think there's always a way to kind of catch up, hopefully. But I think it's a matter of strategy also, personally. If you find the right strategy, suddenly the tide can turn, I think. Lebanon is a small country, but you have big countries in the region where you can have like a large population engaged and people clicking and people looking. And if you can, capitalize on that technically, you should be able to monetize it. But it's interesting you brought up regional news, because how important is regional news, especially in situations like what's happening in the region now and around the world, but there's a lot of protests happening. How important is it to maintain regional news as opposed to relying on often like state-owned media?
It's really important for Lebanese media outlets to expand their coverage regionally, because the Lebanese advertising market is really small. And taking into consideration what's happening right now, the fiscal situation, the financial crisis, they need to target a bigger audience to generate revenues. And given the fact that most Arabs are young and connected, there's an opportunity there to grab.
But are people consuming news more in these kinds of situations? And how many questions are they asking? Are they aware of what's really happening? And are you guys really reporting on things that are not being fed to you by, politicians and decision makers?
Look, honestly, most media outlets in Lebanon are either directly owned by politicians or indirectly affiliated with local or regional governments. So sometimes...
That's very interesting. It's not the answer I expected, actually, because when you read the paper, you do get, listen, I don't read Arabic, so I'm not as well versed on what's being printed in the news or published in the news. But I hear that, of course, every news outlet has its own slant, obviously because of who owns it. But I was kind of hoping that you had a little bit more leeway. So
There are some independent media outlets.
Yeah,
but
like which ones?
Their reach, I don't want to name any outlets, but they have a small reach, okay? And they're mainly targeting intellectuals. The challenge is to reach a bigger audience. And to do that, you need funding.
Yeah, which is becoming a problem even for you guys.
Absolutely.
So never mind the real independent media. So who owns Annahar?
Okay, it's a number of shareholders. These include the Twaini family, Hariri, obviously, and some other shareholders.
So do you get directives on how to report the news? How much oversight is there in a newspaper? Because you would hope that they would, even if you own a newspaper, you'd want to run it in good faith in the way that news is supposed to be run, which is to have reporters on the ground kind of telling stories with as little bias as possible. Ultimately that's the ideal of journalism, right? So how much directive do you get at your newspaper, and I imagine at most newspapers?
Okay, I can speak for Annahar English. We're truly independent in that sense. You can see that in our reporting. We've been warning about the financial crisis for months now. Our political coverage is balanced, and we've been reporting the facts. As simple as that.
And is there any censorship? Do you ever, are there lines that
Not
you know
really,
that
no.
you can't cross, or things that you can't say because you might offend certain groups?
I'll be honest. In English, you've got more
leeway.
Yeah.
Why is that?
You're targeting mainly academics, intellectuals.
You don't have as much influence over the streets, I guess, in some ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you speak ever with colleagues from other regions? And is there a lot of censorship overall, you would say, in the Middle East, more maybe than the West?
Definitely. Journalists faced prosecution on defamation charges, blasphemy, you name it.
Yeah.
So most journalists exercise some form of, you can call it self-censorship.
Do you think, though, that censorship on the part of whoever owns the media, which is often people who are in positions of power, political power, do you think that censorship discourages people from
Absolutely.
getting angry because they're not aware of it? Or does it encourage them to look for it somewhere else? Or does it make them angry that they're not allowed to find out about certain things?
Actually, I would like to highlight another issue with censorship and media ownership. The industry is no longer attracting talent because of this.
Because of?
Journalists are underpaid. Journalists live or operate in challenging circumstances. So you don't see the industry attracting talent anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge.
That's great for, corrupt politicians.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
It is. So if you're listening...
Sort of, yeah.
You have to start encouraging the news. At the end of the day, the news is there to serve the people, right?
Absolutely.
Why did you become a journalist?
I had a passion to hold those in power accountable.
Okay. Do you feel that you do that in some way?
Absolutely. We're doing our best.
Yeah, because that's the big problem. That's why corruption thrives, is when they're not held accountable. Do you think that maybe if there was a shift, now let's go back a little bit to the business model, because in the US, for example, a big portion of the income from advertising, it comes from video content. Is this something that regional news outlets are strong at doing, or is it still very segregated between TV, like the old school TV and print media have kind of stuck to their way of doing things?
It's developing, but we're lagging behind.
Yeah.
Because it's basically a vicious cycle. We're underfunded, We can't attract enough talent, so you end up producing less original content. And the cycle goes on and on and on.
Yeah. It does. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you can kind of create some kind of buzz online, it's always something that can grow if the right pieces come into place. What about social media? Like that's one of the things that, of course, news has to do to kind of reach people and get people talking. Is that something that you guys do a lot of?
I mean, every media outlet has to use social media today. Okay, you have to be on social media.
Yeah.
But again, that's not enough.
Do you personally oversee like the Annahar English Twitter account?
No, not personally.
Okay. Is that somewhere where you feel like there's more oversight? Because there's a lot of governments that have acquired, software, spy software, tracking software to kind of find dissidents online. Maybe not as much here as in other countries in the region that we don't have to mention. We all know who they are. Israel has that Pegasus. You've heard of Pegasus? Yep. That software that tracks people who criticize the regimes. Of course, AI has made it very difficult. You're talking about making things challenging for journalists. It's made it very difficult for journalists to freely express ideas. Do you feel that at all?
No, not really. Not in Lebanon. I mean, definitely they've been cracking down on journalists. They've been arresting people.
Do you know people personally who've been arrested?
I know, of course, I know people who have been arrested and released. But again, the real issue is when a journalist feels that he's not protected by law. Again, he'll exercise some form of self-censorship. And that's the worst form. When you feel you're not protected, you won't speak the truth,
you won't
basically.
Take the risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it easier to operate in a small country like Lebanon to kind of tell the stories of what's happening, even though you have all those different sides and political and religious sects? Yeah.
I mean, again, because everything is politicized in Lebanon, okay? Everything is editorialized. It basically helps you in some way express your opinion, but at the same time, you have to consider a lot of factors. You don't want to offend this religious guy, or you don't want to offend this politician because he's got shares in your media outlet, because he owns shares in your media outlets.
Yeah.
Again,
self-censorship. Yeah, we all everyone does that to a certain extent. If you work for a company, you're not going to say something terrible about your boss or something,
absolutely.
Right? So right now you have a revolution in Lebanon. What would happen, first of all, how big of a role do you think the media has played in kind of getting people together and mobilizing? And do you think that things would be different if there was no independent media?
I think they've done a pretty good job so far, given the fact that most media outlets, like I said before, are owned by politicians directly or indirectly. Take, for example, say pro-government media outlets, okay? Even those eventually had to cover the protests. I mean, they ignored them for the first few days, but again, they eventually had to cover these protests simply because it undermined their credibility.
Absolutely.
After a few days. So, I mean, yes, could say they did pretty good so far. Look, a really big positive is the fact that investigative journalists are being given more airtime. You can see it in the different investigative journalism episodes being aired all
on
night.
On TV you're talking about, yeah.
Even in print journalism, okay, they're getting more space. So that's a really big positive.
Yeah. So do you assign some of your reporters to investigate stories? Or?
Absolutely.
Tell us about a story you did recently.
Well, we investigated a lot of issues. We've been doing it for like a year now.
Yeah.
Whether it's the trash crisis, the power outages, the reforms in public sector, corruption at Beirut port, you name it.
What's the most shocking thing that you guys uncovered in the last year?
I would say everything is shocking. I mean, it's been how many years now? 30 years since the Civil War ended? And you still have power outages. Isn't that shocking?
That's shocking, but you did not uncover that. I knew that already. I'm shocked too.
What I'm trying to say
Yeah.
is we know there's corruption.
Yeah.
It's obvious. What's more shocking is there's no law enforcement. I mean, you know who's corrupt. So many cases have been uncovered so far. There's no legal action.
So are those some
There's
of the
no
cases?
accountability.
Do you guys investigate those kinds of cases? So corruption is a big one right now. And I think in many of the countries where there's revolutions, but specifically in Lebanon for sure, that's the biggest problem. And I think a lot of people feel that the only way it will be solved is if there's justice. And by that, we mean legal justice, right?
Absolutely. Law enforcement.
Yeah. So do you think that's going to happen?
I don't think so, no.
Why?
Not anytime soon.
Why?
Because, the ruling class is involved in those corruption cases, okay? Well, they're going to hold themselves accountable.
That's the whole point. If you overthrow a government or if a government steps down and are no longer in power, then don't they become subject to
Absolutely, but we're
the
not there
law
yet.
of the land?
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
So basically, my question was, in your investigation, have you uncovered any kind of evidence that's been helpful in kind of helping build a public case against corrupt individuals?
I investigated, take for example, I investigated a few years ago corruption at Beirut port. I presented some hard evidence.
Yeah.
But
nothing came of it. That's interesting, because you would think that if you present evidence publicly, it would not only anger people, but people who are in legal positions would seize that information and use it, in a case to apply the law, which is their job.
Absolutely. And look, it's not an isolated case. It's been on TV for the past few weeks. There's so many cases that have been on TV, like evidence has been presented on TV, no one took action.
No one took action. So first of all, who is your audience? You mentioned for Annahar English, it's a little bit of a different audience than the population
like 50%
at large.
of our audience comes from the US. It's based in the US and the GCC.
Yeah.
And Europe. The remaining 50% is Lebanon.
On your website, you have certain stories that require you to subscribe to read the full story. Do they do that also on the Arab site?
Yes.
How successful is that?
I would say compared to other media outlets, we're pretty successful.
Okay. Is it a challenge though?
It is a big challenge. I'll give you an example.
Let's just point out that it's like $1, right? To get a subscription, which is cheaper than a subscription to the paper
it's a
version.
Coffee, yeah. It's the price of a coffee, yeah.
Not even. My coffees are like 7 thou.
It's challenging because I get calls from friends asking me to unlock some article online. And I'm like, it's only $1.
From your friends to boot. You'd think they'd support you, right?
Exactly.
You'd think that's why we're talking about how important news is. It is important. None of those cases that you're talking about, no one would know about them if it wasn't for news. And yet,
absolutely.
Why is it that people feel like it's not worth $1? It's pretty shocking. But why are you charging $1? Really, is this really going to change the bottom line for the news outlet?
No, it's a $6 per month subscription, but it starts at $1.
Yeah.
We're encouraging people to subscribe.
Okay.
Subscribe, see if the news is worth your money.
Yeah.
And then decide.
So what do you get for $1?
Full month subscription.
For all the stories,
yes,
all the
absolutely.
content. So why does it go up to $6?
The full platform, Arabic, English.
I see. Is that the model for
but
most
people
newspapers?
want
Not
independent.
Yeah.
People basically want independent media outlets, but they're not willing to pay for that.
Yeah.
Okay, how am I gonna produce content if I'm not making money?
I think that you probably have to find other models. If you go to the most successful, if you go to the Fox website, they don't ask you to pay $1 or $6, right? So perhaps that's not the right model, even though I personally think that, it's worth it. But perhaps there are other models that would be more successful. Maybe it's more in the approach and how you grow the audience.
Look, the model has been pretty successful for us
Yeah.
so far.
Okay.
I mean, but the thing is, like I said before, the transition came late and it takes time.
Definitely.
So you have to weather.
Yeah, it's been 20 years
Yeah.
things
And
started
the model has
changing.
worked for the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the
Yeah, do they
Washington
charge?
Post. Yes,
They do?
They all charge
Okay.
subscription fees. So, and it worked for them. And I can tell you that's going to work for us, but it takes time to break even. Most of the digital ad revenue, most of the growth in the digital ad revenue doesn't offset the decline in print revenue yet.
Yeah.
So,
How many newspapers do you sell now per week?
I have no idea, actually.
I'm sure it's not that many. I don't remember the last time I saw someone reading like a paper newspaper, right? It's like,
There are some people who still read newspapers.
yeah? Do you?
I do.
What do you read? What news do you read? I'm sure you check out all, what everyone.
I have to check all sections, actually.
Yeah.
Because I'm in the industry.
Yeah. Which news in the Middle East do you kind of trust and turn to when you're
Look, for
starting
someone
your
in
day?
the news industry, you have to actually read different news
Opinions,
publications
yeah.
and different opinions. Exactly. So I have to read basically news from across the spectrum. So
But can you name a few?
in Lebanon, I read Al-Akhbar. I used to read As-Safir.
Yeah.
I read Al-Liwa. I mean, every newspaper
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
I have to read them.
That's what you do all day. You sit at your desk reading news.
You have to do some media monitoring. I mean, that's part of the job.
Yeah, it is. So do you, as the managing editor, do you do a lot of reporting yourself or do you assign most of the work?
I do assign most of the work. I do more than just manage the website. So actually, I contribute to, let's say, how do you call this? Business development.
Sure.
to the business development aspect of the
Yeah.
newspaper. So
Annahar has actually been called Lebanon's equivalent of the New York Times. You've heard that before by Charles Glass, who's a British-American journalist. Definitely, we said this before, everyone has an agenda. What would you say the agenda of Annahar is, or how would you describe its political slant?
look, I would say compared to other outlets, we're very balanced and objective and fair in our
Yeah,
coverage.
I bet you they all say that. I see what you're saying. There's worse.
Yeah.
Much worse.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. No, seriously, we're really balanced in that sense. I mean, if you read Annahar, you can find different perspectives.
Yeah.
So, and that's really important.
It is important. It's very important. So you've been covering the revolution. What's your take as someone who's been really focusing on the day-to-day? You have a lot of information that most people don't have, probably. What's your take?
It's obvious that the revolution is leaderless. It's decentralized.
But that's on purpose, right?
Not really, no. I mean, when the protests broke out, no one really organized those protests.
Yeah, it was spontaneous to a certain
Exactly.
degree.
I mean, it started late. It started with a few hundred protesters, and then gained momentum.
Yeah.
Grew. And I think it's gonna keep gaining momentum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think our ruling class should underestimate the movement, the revolution, whatever you want to call it, because the financial, the monetary, and the economic crises are gonna get worse.
Mm-hmm.
More people are gonna be unemployed. They're gonna lose their jobs. This is happening every day. There's layoffs. Companies are going bankrupt. More and more people will take to the streets. I mean, you have to take immediate measures.
What are the measures they should take?
I would say they should start with official capital controls right now. Then consider a haircut. Then request assistance.
I don't think the haircut is that popular, but the haircut would have to be applied in a
Look,
way.
that's the only way to protect small depositors.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way to protect small depositors.
So the haircut is for a certain level and above,
absolutely.
right?
And it can be proportional to the interest earned by those big depositors.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way to go if you want to protect small depositors. They really ran out of options. So they have to assume that responsibility. And now they're still trading blame, trading accusations, and nothing is being done. They should start with the cabinet formation and then take immediate action.
Mm-hmm. Are there any people that you've met in your, day-to-day that you feel should be involved in a new government? Do you have any names to bring to the table?
I wouldn't name anyone, but they have to bring in independent people that project confidence.
Yeah, that's important. to kind of rally people around you. You need like
Absolutely.
a persona, someone who has like gravitas to a certain degree and experience that's credible, of
And
course.
people whose reputation haven't been tarnished.
Yes. And preferably people who don't like to steal other people's money and things. That's like number one on the list in this country. So one more question. Where would you like to see the news industry go? You know, if you're going to continue being a part of it, what's your ultimate vision for like how it should be?
I would like to see like truly independent media outlets in Lebanon. I think that's going to take time, but it's going to happen eventually.
And how would that make a difference in kind of the functioning of this country or in any country?
Look, media outlets have a role. They have to relay the facts to the people so the people can hold their governments accountable, right?
Yeah.
That's key to any democracy, right?
Yeah, but you said yourself that you've brought facts before, then presented evidence against, you know, corrupt individuals, and that it was kind of swept under the rug.
Okay, but this ruling class wouldn't be here forever, right?
Right.
It's changing. It's happening today.
Yeah. All right. And what about in terms of the business aspect of it? How would you like to see things develop?
The fact that political funding or political money has stopped flowing, it's going to help those newspapers. It's going to be a long journey, but it's going to help them figure out a way to make money.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Independently. Sooner or later, they're going to get there.
It's kind of like
So,
fight or die
yeah.
kind of situation.
So that's the positive aspect
Yeah.
of what's
That's nice. Light at the end
happening
of
right now.
the dark tunnel. Well, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
And I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks.
Don't say anything bad about anyone. It's all good. Great news.
Looking great.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Well, that's all the news for today. That's it for today. We'd love to hear your comments. Please comment and subscribe to this podcast and check out all of Hakawati's great shows. Bye, everyone.